What the Tech is sponsored by Shutterstock.com. With over 28 million high-quality stock photos, illustrations, vectors, and video clips. For 25% off your new account, go to Shutterstock.com and use offer code WhatTheTech1013.
What the Tech?
Hey everybody, welcome to What the Tech. I'm Andrew Zarin. Of course, I'm joined by Paul Thoride, as I am each and every week. How you doing, Paul?
Pretty good.
To match you this week.
I look like I just went through a wind machine or something.
You look like you've been through a war.
I don't know why.
What happened?
No, it's obviously it's been a busy and big day, following another busy and big day. So it's,
people in the chat room, when you came on, people were commenting that you look like you're on the verge of crying.
I don't know what's going on here.
I'm sorry to the people listening. You can't see Paul, but he does look a little.
I look like that the Heat Miser guy in that Christmas special. You know what I mean?
To make you feel better, I know that there was a lot of Apple stuff happening. I am wearing the traditional Paul Thoride blue on the show.
Yeah, I'm not upset because of the Apple stuff. If that's the concern, the one thing I will mention is that we're now on like day 5 of what has been one of the busier times I've experienced professionally, right? Because you've got Windows 8.1 came out, which by all accounts should have been a pretty small release, but has generated an enormous discussion around problems related to the upgrade. They pulled the Windows RT upgrade, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I was working on that, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, all day long, all 3 days. And then I had to prepare my Surface 2 stuff because I had gotten that early and, could post at midnight yesterday. Stayed up till midnight like an idiot so I could get that stuff out accurately. Kind of worked through all that. I mean, one of the things people maybe don't appreciate is that I have to hand moderate all of the comments that go to my website because otherwise it would just get out of control.
Yeah.
And the 1-year anniversary of commenting on my sites is coming up. And as of today, I have moderated over 25,000 comments.
Manually,
one by one, actually read them all. And then, of course, responded to many of them.
And we're not talking about the spam, obviously, that you get.
Oh, no. Those are the ones that got through. I have I have manually deleted spam and spammers from the system to some number that I don't know because they're gone. But no, I mean, so there's that aspect of it, too, because one of the problems is when you spend a big weekend writing about Windows 8.1, whatever, I mean, the comments just kind of flood through. It's really bad.
Yeah.
And so this morning, of course, we had the Nokia stuff, which we'll get to. That generated 6 articles, this morning, but before noon, and then went for a walk, went to lunch, came back, and Apple had their event. And Apple just announced a bunch of stuff, and I haven't written a word about that yet. I will, other than on Twitter, of course. But,
there's so much happening, and I think I asked you this.
Busy.
I asked you this a couple months ago, and I can't remember what you said. But in your career as a tech journalist. Has there ever been a busier time than this? I mean, the reality, I cannot remember, since I started doing podcasts like 5 years ago, I cannot remember ever having so many product releases at the same time. Like literally 2 months or 1 month apart from each other.
Yeah, well, by the way, I should mention there's more too. I mean, some of the other stuff, I mean, I've got a Chromebook that came in. There are other devices happening. There's a lot of stuff, so is this the busiest time ever? I mean, I don't know. I can't, I'm not sure about that. I mean, I would say that certainly we've had busy months like this. But yeah, it's in the top 2 or 3.
So
it's a busy time.
I was bitching and moaning on Twitter about, the crazy, the Apple stuff and Microsoft and all this stuff is happening. And I wrote, I think over the weekend, I think it was Friday, like, Tuesday is going to be one of those days. And I received this in the mail by my friends at Groove Shark. They sent me a shot glass saying, you're going to need this.
Nice.
So I wanted to thank them on the show for sending that. But Paul,
you should have done an Apple drinking game during their press conference.
Every time they said magical?
Every time they said something like magical or... you know, whatever
Aluminium.
terms they use these days.
Aluminium.
Aluminium.
So let's start off with that. Obviously, I mean, the Nokia stuff, to be honest, I was really, we're going to talk about the Nokia announcements because I think they unveiled some really amazing stuff.
Yep.
Actually, before we go into the Apple stuff and before we go into the Nokia stuff, I do want to talk about our sponsor. I don't want to rush our live read. I don't want to interrupt our rants and raving stuff that we're going to be doing.
Rant and rave? Is that what we do?
You know what? I rant and rave. I rant and rave. You know what you do? You like I'll say something like, "I love my MacBook," and you'll be like, "Yeah, you would," and that's it.
Right.
Yeah, that sums up this entire show. But what I do want to talk about is our sponsor, if I could ever get there. And there you go. It's Shutterstock.com. Now with over 28 million stock photos, illustrations, vectors, and video clips. This is an amazing website. If you are a web designer, if you are the project manager for any kind of demo that you're going to be doing at your job, I know many of our viewers are hands-on with demonstrations that they do, and they do in PowerPoint presentations. Shutterstock is a great place because you could find pretty much anything you're looking for at Shutterstock, whether it's a baby crying to a guy holding an iPad up. You could find it, and that's an amazing thing. And plus 28 million high-quality images and videos and vectors. It's a lot to choose from. They're offering a phenomenal deal for our audience. You get 25% off on a new account when you go to Shutterstock.com and you use offer code WhatTheTech1013. That's WhatTheTech1013. You get 25% off. And we've been using every time we do a website job, and I think Josh that did the show prior with us, the Apple coverage, he uses Shutterstock all the time for when he's making a website or when he has to make some sort of pamphlet for a company. He's always using stock image from there. And if they don't have it now, guess what? They're adding 20,000 images per day, so they're going to have something for you anytime, regardless when you're looking. That's Shutterstock.com. Offer code is WhatTheTech1013, and you get 25% off on a new account. I want to thank Shutterstock for supporting What the Tech, and of course the GFK Network. I want to thank them for supporting the other shows on the GFK Network. So, Paul, let's go right into this. It was one of the better Apple announcements, in my opinion.
Interesting.
In recent years, they.
Well, how so?
I thought the last time they did the iPad stuff, it was really bad. The last OS 10 announcement that they did was really bad when they concentrated on. I think they were concentrating on like pages for like 45 minutes, and they were demoing.
Well, the
Excel
truth is, they
spreadsheets.
actually did a bunch of that too, though. I mean,
They did.
I don't know. I drifted off during this, but they were mocking up a magazine design with Eddie Q's face.
I figured
on
out
it.
their logic behind this, Paul.
Like, guys, what are you doing?
I kind of figured out the logic behind it. Like, they've been doing this for, I think, the last 3 announcements. And I keep wondering, I'm like, why are they spending so much time on word processing?
Is it really about building suspense?
No.
I mean, do you?
No,
okay.
you know what? This is their way. I could see the scenario. They were sitting in a meeting, and they're like, you know what? A lot of people on the Windows side are complaining that they want the desktop because they're doing spreadsheets and they're doing Windows. So this is, you know what we're going to do? We're going to cater to them. We're going to tell them, look how easy it is to do spreadsheets without all that other clutter. By the way, I'm predicting.
That makes some sense. The only thing I would say is Apple actually has a history of doing this kind of thing. And Steve Jobs, for all of the credit he gets for being a master showman and doing those amazing keynotes and so forth, he used to beat stuff like this to death sometimes too. He would sit down at a Mac or something and he would just sit there and go, oh, let me show you the other fonts and let me show you this. And I mean, he also had a way of beating stuff to death. And I think there's part of the Apple culture that just loves,
well, the numbers. I mean, they beat the death
stuff. I mean, it's very strange.
I mean, those numbers that we get, like 50,000 and 20,000 and number one and 80%. I mean, they love doing that. But I thought it was one of the better ones. The Mac stuff, the iLife stuff that they updated, it's about time. It's been years. They haven't updated iLife since 2011. Yes.
Right.
They kind of were forced into updating this thing, and
forced. What do you mean?
Yeah, because I don't think it means nothing to them at this point. I don't think they really care about it.
I really don't. I mean, at one time, obviously, iLife was very important and was the big differentiator for the Mac. iWork, whatever it's called, has never really taken off in the same way, but it served kind of the same purpose in the sense that Apple wanted to, at least have an option that was not Microsoft, on the productivity side.
And I thought it was a great thing. People used it. People really used it.
I will say this, by the way, I predicted, and I think I did this on this podcast, that a future version of iLife would just be web-based. That it would be something that would work across platforms and all that kind of stuff. They didn't announce anything like that today.
No,
so,
not yet.
I just sort of expect that to happen. But then again, you got to kind of push everything.
I have a feeling that
through a special filter.
I have a feeling that the reason why it's not web-based, like iPhoto, they are not confident in their online security when it comes to it, and they don't want there to be this entire problem. I mean, they just added two-step authentication, and I showed it on the show.
They may also not want people to use a solution that will work equally well on Windows or Android or whatever.
Yeah, they want you need to be in the ecosystem.
And ultimately that might be Apple's strongest driver. So.
Oh, look, you could. I think you are able to download and install OS 10 right now.
Neat.
For free. How do I do it? I don't even know how. I don't know how to do it.
I just have zero interest in that.
In doing it.
In the Mac. I just don't care.
So let's talk about that. Mavericks is now free.
Let's talk about your lack of interest in
Let's
the Mac.
talk about your lack of interest. Do you think that, are you surprised by that they're doing free? Is this their way of kind of,
By the way, every time Apple comes out with a free or low cost upgrade for macOS 10, everyone acts like the gods have just showered them with manna. Macs are extremely expensive. So I guess the only thing I would say is that these OS updates should be free. I mean, you've already paid for it. So I get it. I appreciate it. I mean, the other thing I would just point out is that, I had made the argument on Twitter. It's like, well, Windows 8.1 is also free, the latest version of Windows. And then a friend of mine came back and said, and others probably, well, yeah, but it's only free if you're upgrading from Windows 8. And that's not exactly the majority of the world. Fair enough. But there are right now 120 million-ish Windows 8 users. That's more than all of the Mac users in the world. So actually, Windows 8.1 is free for more people than is this Mac OS 10 Mavericks thing. So
I didn't think it was that big
whatever.
of a deal. I mean, it was $29 to begin with, and they never did any kind of security or authentication for the copy of OS 10. I mean, it was never a big deal for them, and they were never making money from it anyway. Who's going and buying OS 10 in the store? I'm sure people upgrade, but they make their money from selling the product with it.
Right.
I don't know. I thought it was, just another one of those Apple things where the operating system is free and it's not about it. It's about the hardware.
No. You know what? Apple is in a position now where Apple has always kind of been about lock-in, right? We just talked about iLife and those apps and everything. And I think they're at the point now where they just they look at it. And what they realize is if they sell something like iLife 2, I'm sorry, iLife 2. I mean, the new version of iLife.
Yeah.
That many people just won't upgrade because they don't really see the value in it. If they sell something like the upgrade to Mac OS 10 Mavericks, I think many people who use a Mac today would look at that and say, there's nothing wrong with the system I'm using. It works fine. By giving this stuff away for free, they're able to continue that lock-in thing on both platforms, which I think is very important to them. And more important, and this has emerged as Apple's, I think, most important fact around their platform compared to the competition. It prevents fragmentation.
It does,
right?
yeah.
When you give this thing away with something that, compared to, I think, the amount of effort and time and money they put into their hardware, which is a relatively inexpensive thing, a modest OS to an upgrade, a modest OS to a suite of apps that's been around for over a decade. That keeps people on your platform. It, more important, keeps everyone on the same version going forward. Like it keeps everyone in the same pool. Whereas, the big problem on Android is all the different versions out there. By the way, big problem on Windows too. Yeah. Windows is XP, 7, Vista, 8, and now 8.1. I mean, you could make the argument that Windows is pretty fragmented.
I mean, they're really taking the iOS mentality and putting it into the traditional desktop operating system. That's that's all they're doing. I mean, nobody goes and buys. Could you imagine if they sold you iOS with the updates?
I mean, well, I think they didn't they originally? Or no, maybe that was only on the iPod Touch.
What did they do? I don't remember. No, I think it was like GarageBand. If you want, I can't remember what it was, but uh, they're taking the iOS, the mobile operating system approach to this, and I think that's great. That's great for the numbers that you saw. They were showing something like 60% of all people are right now using iOS 7 of all iPhone users, and millions of people have adapted to iOS 7. Now, those are great stats to have. And Android can't do those stats. Android is they're getting better at it, obviously, but it's such a fragmented.
I wonder though, so the only thing I'll say is, I'm not going to argue the fragmentation thing one way or the other. Although I did argue in the past that fragmentation is not the big issue that people make it out to be. But it's a nice story for Apple to tell. I mean, it almost doesn't matter whether it's true or not. It's a good story for Apple to tell. But if you have iOS 7 today, for a fact, for example, that you could bring up many apps, and it still looks like the old version of iOS because they wrote it to, the old version of iOS, and so it doesn't have the new typography, it doesn't have the new style of keyboard, right? When the keyboard comes up, it's maybe it's gray or grayish blue, or it's got that kind of old-fashioned color scheme, and so there's a certain fragmentation there, right? There's certain jarringness to moving back and forth between new style apps and old style apps. It's the same thing you see in Windows 8 with Metro style apps and desktop apps. But when you go to Android, if you think about it, I mean, I think most people who had multiple Android devices would not actually understand the differences between the versions of the OSs that were on each one, and that they wouldn't care either because all of the apps they have probably run on all of them.
Well,
anyway.
Do you think they don't notice because they're not savvy to that, or they just don't care because they're just using it in a different way?
I don't think it matters. That's my point. I actually don't think it matters.
Like I think with Windows, like the whole with GDR3, for example, I've gotten so many messages this week from people like wanting me to explain it even more on how I did GDR3, how it is. I've never gotten any kind of feedback. I've done these videos about how I've rooted this and jailbroken this and whatever. I've never gotten that much feedback from someone, like that much interest in changing to the latest and the greatest. I was surprised at the amount of feedback I got over that. And I wonder if it's because we have, now I'm one of you guys now, by the way, as Windows Phone users, we've never been able to do it this way? Or is it that it's a different audience, it's a different group of people, they're a little bit more savvy to these things?
Sure.
I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting question on who's using these products. But as far as iOS goes, it's... You saw that they did the update. It's a major change to the UI, and some people love it, and other people's absolutely hate it.
Yep. I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
It's
not bad. It's all right. So let's talk about the big announcement, and that's the iPad Air. I guess they had to change the name to something that kind of separates it from all the other iPads. Another, great marketing by Apple. Make it Air so it's lighter, thinner. You know exactly what it is, and you're going to want it. No pre-order. Available November 1st. So you're going to have all these crazy lines again. People are going to be standing online waiting for the iPad. You're going to get that great promo shot in the news, and the line is going to be wrapped around, and they're going to talk about how nobody could buy this thing. What do you think of the overall hardware of the iPad Air?
I think it's all great. I when the iPad Mini, came out last year, I really liked the kind of style of it. The wedge kind of design they have there on the sides, the thinness of it, of course, and all that kind of stuff. Applying that to the full size iPad is great. And I think one of the rare criticisms of the previous generation iPad is they went from 2 to 3 and 4, where the iPad 3 and 4 were both, thicker. Which is very unusual for an Apple product to go in that direction because of the extra battery and so forth.
By the way, it's stereo speakers.
Is it really?
Yeah, two sides.
Stereo. Unfortunately, they're both on the same side. But whatever. Okay. So I think this is a beautiful looking machine. I think this is great, and I think the Air name is suggestive of a possible future Pro product. That maybe has a bigger screen.
Huh. Interesting. So you would have the iPad Pro and the iPad Air?
I'm just speculating.
Yeah, no, I mean,
sure.
It makes sense. And no, The problem with that I have with this is that they unveiled this beautiful device and $499, and it's thinner and it's lighter. Look how much better it is. By the way, the iPad 2 is still available at $399.
Yeah. So right, that's weird to me. Right.
I mean, $399 for that, and the new Retina
How old is
iPad
the
Mini.
iPad 2 now?
3 years old. 3 years.
It's 3 years old. Is it really 3 years old?
In March, it'll be 4, I think.
No.
It's
the original iPad came in 2010, so
2011.
It's 2.5 years old.
Is it?
Isn't it?
Yeah. Hold on. Let's do 3 generations old. Yeah, it's gonna be 3 years old in March, but it's still on the market. Same everything. Nothing has changed. They're still calling it the iPad 2, which is weird. They should just call it the iPad and the iPad Air. The pricing is bizarre to me because you have the Retina Mini that was announced at $399. So the Retina Mini and the iPad 2 are the same price point now.
I think we all sort of hoped the iPad Mini Retina would just be the iPad Mini and that it would be $329. I will say this. I mean, Apple, again, you have to filter everything about Apple through this special kind of formula because they just don't play the game the same way that other companies do. I mean, for example, let me look this up before I say it, but the Kindle Fire HDX was just announced. In fact, it's shipping now. I've got one here. It's a great tablet, really high quality. It's got kind of a crazy looking cover, yada, yada, yada. But an HDX Kindle Fire starts at $229, right? For a 16 gig version, 7-inch tablet, roughly equivalent. It's got a 1080p screen. $229. Yeah. It's a lot less expensive. It's not even comparable.
But for someone, but not for us, but for someone that, the average user, is the ecosystem, do they see the differences in the ecosystem where, these apps are not available?
By the way, that's an excellent question. I don't know what they see, but I can tell you that in evaluating this device, I've been using the new version of the Nexus 7, the Google device, a lot more this year than I had in the past. And I'm starting to come around to the notion that that kind of pure Google experience and the wide open nature of it, which was kind of the huge advantage of Windows for so many years, is actually an advantage on the tablet side as well. And all of the Amazon apps that matter, that you might want, Kindle, Audible, and so forth, are all available. But when you go into the Amazon world, many apps are not available. And actually, I'm starting to see that as a problem. For example, Microsoft makes a couple of dozen, well, at least a dozen and a half apps for Android. You can't get any of them on an Amazon Kindle. And that's a problem for someone like me. So I don't know what normal people see, but I think that's something to consider. But on that note, you can get a 16 gig Nexus 7 for $229 too, by the way.
Yeah.
So strange. But again, Apple plays by their own rules. And so I think what we need to do is kind of give them a pass on that and understand that, Apple is never going to match the price on that stuff. That's not how they work, right? So, it's like, what was it, $299 for a year-old iPad Mini with a sub-HD display versus $229 for a comparable Nexus 7 or HDX, both of which have 1080p displays. It's tough. It's a tough one. I think you can make the case that there's an advantage to the Apple ecosystem and that they can command those kind of prices. I will also say, and it's important to note this because I think people who are a little too invested in tech stuff sort of overlook this kind of thing. The low res nature of the iPad Mini screen, it's not actually a huge problem. That screen's nice.
The iPad Mini.
And that's something we see on Windows phones as well. A lot of, like the Windows phone you have, the 520, has an 800 by 480 screen.
Yeah,
it's actually a nice screen.
No, it's not bad. Yeah. I mean, for what it is, it's fine. Somebody noted that actually the best product right now to buy is a refurbished iPad Mini. It's $249. If you want an iPad Mini, you could get it for $249. That's not bad at all.
29, yeah.
That's a
For a
great
16 gig.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic, actually.
And it's a refurb, so you know that they looked at it, they fixed it, whatever.
But you do this, right? So in other words, let's say you look at this and you think, okay, I don't mind paying a small premium for an iPad Mini, the Retina version. So I'm going to buy one of these things. I realize you can't actually buy them today, but let's price one out. Like a 32 gig Wi-Fi only version of this. It's $500.
A lot of money.
It's $500. I mean, a 32 gig Wi-Fi only version of the HDX is $269. That's half.
Of which one? The Amazon?
Yep.
Yeah.
And the Nexus 7, same thing.
Yeah.
Half.
The science behind the
Right?
pricing, the science behind the pricing is fascinating to me because this is how I see Amazon justifying it. Well, you're buying an Amazon product, you're in the Amazon ecosystem. When you're on this thing and you see that, that case or that Christmas thing that you want to get, there's a good chance you're going to buy it on Amazon now because now you're involved and they're making their money back that way. Apple's making,
sure.
an insane amount of money back on the apps. That's really where they make all their money.
By the way, the person who spends $500 on an iPad Mini and tries to justify it because the ecosystem is so vast, which is absolutely valid, and likes the safety and security of being in the iOS ecosystem, likes the style of the device, whatever. They're an Apple guy. Who cares?
Yeah.
A year from now, that person is going to salute the fact that Apple has released iOS 8 for free. Like they're gonna tout this as a benefit of the platform.
Yeah.
And it's like, guys, you just paid $500 for this thing. I mean, they're expensive.
The only reason right now why I'm getting it, because I'm giving mine to my father. My father's dying to have an iPad, so I'm gonna buy an iPad.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna give him mine because
Which one are you gonna get though? The full size one or the other one?
the full size one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's my, I take it to bed. That's all I use this thing for. It's always in my bedroom next to the bed. When I'm, I'll play a game before I go to sleep, or I'll read the news, or I go on Reddit. Right now, the last couple of months, all I've been doing on this thing is going to Reddit and just looking at cat pictures. Literally.
So, you know what I just realized? They did not announce a version of the iPad that has that login chip in the home button.
Oh no, it doesn't have it. It doesn't have
It's
it.
very curious. You would think that it would for that
Not
much
surprised.
money.
Siri, it'll be Siri next time. That's equivalent to the Siri,
Surprised by that,
not being added.
actually. You would have thought the iPad Air and the iPad Mini with Retina that would have been part of the deal and could have been used to kind of offset the the price differential.
It's
Expensive.
I thought overall it was a decent announcement. They touched on everything they were supposed to touch on. I knew we weren't going to get an Apple TV announcement, an upgraded Apple TV announcement. I think that's going to be its own individual thing where they talk about all the partners that they have. And the iWatch thing, really, I don't think this thing is coming.
Yeah.
I mean, why would they? Why would they?
I don't care about that.
Samsung put that thing out. It's hideous. Nobody wants it. But
Right.
I thought it was overall pretty decent. I'm going to get it. I know many people are going to get it. The new MacBooks were fine. The Mac Pro is ridiculous. That thing is just...
we guessed that, right? Didn't we? 3,000 was what any normal person might have thought for the price.
I said it was going to be $17.99. And the way that I justify that price point is because nothing is upgradable.
So here's how you could tell it was going to be more than $17.99, because the longer they talked about it, the more they went on and on about how this kind of RAM is really expensive and you can't get this usually, and it's got dual this and this that, and the more they talked, it was like, oh, the price, it's going up, it's going up, it's going up.
I was hoping it's going to be like, and now starting at $78.92. Something absurd.
We're going to price it like the original Lisa.
And this is what we're going to do with this. We're going to offer a 72-month finance at 6.5% interest. Just start selling it like a car.
Year. Figure that out on your own.
Yeah, so I guarantee people would have bought it immediately.
That's a serious niche product. I'm actually kind of confused they made that, but
I guess but who else is making that? There's no competitor, right?
Yeah.
There's no Dell or HP. That's I
know that they do have dedicated professional users who kind of felt like they were being left out of the which they were.
Yeah.
So
people were screaming about it every year when and there's no Mac Pro this year. No Mac Pro.
Right.
Let's talk about the Nokia stuff, Paul, because
Okay.
before this Apple thing, I was like, wow, this is the tablet that I want. $499. I
The
want it.
Nokia one.
The Nokia one, yeah. So they
I don't
announced
know.
a
You know,
lot of stuff.
I did a write up about that one today, and I sometimes I write things up for me. You know, when you think about it, right? I mean, I obviously publish it, but it's almost a way for me to kind of talk through something and then come to my own decision. Because one of the big questions about a Nokia tablet is, you know, Microsoft's probably going to be buying this company. Do we need another Windows RT tablet, really? And so I took this as an opportunity to do some comparisons with the Surface 2, you know, without actually having both of them right here yet, but just an on-paper comparison. And it's kind of interesting because each one of them has some advantages over the other. And as you go through the page there, you can see, you know, it's got that kind of Lumia unibody styling, which I think a lot of people are going to like. It comes in multiple colors. This is the type of thing where if you chip the corner of it on a table or whatever, you're not going to scratch off the paint. The color is imbued right into the polycarbonate of the device. It is the color. That kind of thing I think is neat. They have a very unique keyboard power case / cover thing that's very strange. It's got obviously a keyboard and a gesture trackpad. It's got 2 USB ports, and it has a battery in it that's going to add another 5 hours of life to this thing. You know, what's the quality like? I don't know. I don't have one, so you know we'll have to wait and see on that one. Nokia apps.
Price point is fine. I mean, the price point is $499.
Well, it's $500,
yeah.
right? And so I still maintain that on the Windows RT stuff that Microsoft needs to come in under in Nokia. Anyone making a Windows RT device needs to come in under Apple, right? And so Apple today, as we know, announced you know, the iPad. They didn't lower prices, of course, or Apple. So $500 to start. I don't know if you get $500 to spend on a tablet. Actually, I will say this: the 32 gigs on an iPad is actually not $500, is it? It's more like $600.
Apparently, at the end, Stephen Elop said something like Nokia and Microsoft are coming together or have come together.
Yep.
So,
well, it hasn't. It has to pass various regulatory things, but the basic gist of it is, for $500, you can get an entry-level iPad. The Surface has certain advantages over an iPad, but obviously the iPad has huge advantages over a Surface. But if you're more of a kind of a PC-centric guy, the advantages that the Surface has are pretty important. It has a full USB 3 port. It has more USB expandability through the keyboard.
Are you saying over the Nokia or over the iPad?
Over the iPad.
Okay.
It has a micro SD slot. You can expand the storage. You know, these are, you know, important things in some cases. To the typical iPad user, I don't know. You know, the iPad has all the apps. You know,
and that goes a long way. Yeah,
it really does.
I like the Nokia products. I really do. And you know, I was worried that this thing would be $600 instead of $500, and I think that would have made a huge difference. But
yeah,
it's a beautiful device.
Right.
But
it's a nice looking device, yeah.
But why would you buy this over the Surface? That's my question.
That's the question.
If you have two of them next to each other, why this over the Surface?
Yeah, there are a couple of things there that it depends on the way you're leaning. So one of the reasons would be you want built-in LTE. In the United States, they're going to be selling versions of this on AT&T and Verizon. You can run it on LTE. You cannot do that with the Surface. I mean, obviously you can't through a phone or whatever. But so that's one thing. Nokia's known for their optics on the camera. I don't think buying a tablet for a camera makes a lot of sense. But actually, the camera in the Nokia device is kind of low end for a Nokia device. So I'm not really sure that's a huge advantage. You might dislike the look of the Nokia version. Like I said, the polycarbonate, you know, full color stuff is kind of neat. I mean, you never know. My gut feeling is that the perfect machine is actually some weird combination of these features, and that maybe a year from now, Microsoft will consolidate this down to like a Surface 3, and that will be the right one to get. I can't see the future, but
yeah.
It's a little smaller screen too. You know, the Surface screen is 10.6 inches. This one's 10.1, so it's a little bit closer to an iPad screen. It's IPS. Looks nice outside. I'm not really sure. I mean, they seem very. I think they're very consistent. The two of them compared to each other.
So here, out of all the Nokia stuff, this is what I'm really excited about.
Yep.
The 1320.
The 1320.
Yeah, unsubsidized, 329.
Yes. So this is, in other words, like as a big screen version of the 520.
Of the 520. Now, I love that this is Nokia's thing. Nokia has made it very clear that you can buy these phones unsubsidized, no contract, and they're affordable.
That one is. Yeah.
That one. I mean, the 520, the 620. I mean, they've.
I'll tell you, actually, the big innovation here is that obviously other companies make phablets. They're not, exactly innovating in this category in many ways. But when a company introduces a phablet, it's typically like their flagship phone, like the really high-end, expensive one. And Nokia introduced that phone. It's called a 1520. But I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't believe there are any other phone makers that are making a low-end phablet.
No, nobody.
Right? That actually has nice. This thing has an HD screen. It's Windows Phone 8, so the OS is going to run very well in a dual-core processor. It's expandable memory. The camera's nothing to speak of. The camera's nothing special, but the camera on the 520 is nothing special. And so,
what's the camera in the 1520? It's 20 megapixel.
That is a 20 megapixel pure view camera, and so I'm very interested to test this because it's a nice step up from the 920, 925, 928 cameras,
but not
as high as the 41 megapixel and the 1020, but it's kind of right in the middle. And I've often wondered with the 41 megapixels, like, is there a way we can get somewhere in the middle from a megapixel perspective, same kind of quality, but without the camera bump in the back? And if you look at the mini camera bump that they have, it's exactly like the bump you see on an Lumia 925. It's almost non-existent. It's a very small little bump, and that might be a big deal for people.
But when you're marketing this thing, wouldn't you say it's kind of like a step backwards now? Like I've never seen anybody else put out a higher megapixel phone, and then the following model is a lower megapixel.
Yeah. Well, I think I can only speculate, but I think that the reason they didn't do the 41 megapixel is that on a device that big, having something that big and heavy at
protruding
the top
out,
of the phone might have made it too top heavy.
Yeah,
it might have made it hard to hold. In normal portrait mode. I'm just guessing.
Listen, I think it's still going to be an amazing, quality camera.
Yep.
If we're going based on what the 40 megapixels able to do. No, actually, notice how they didn't talk about the camera in the iPad.
Yeah.
They skipped right over that.
Right. Well, I think for this version, they were trying to sell the idea that it was thinner, because that was something it's a story they didn't have to tell, and they were obviously so excited about it they changed the name of it. Right? I mean, it's kind of interesting when you think about it. I am sure that the camera in the iPad Air is as good or better than what they had last year, which is to say, fine. I mean, I've never thought a camera in a tablet was a big deal, but let's look it up. It's a 720p HD video, 1.2 megapixel photos. It's 5 megapixel photos on the eyesight. So it's 5 megapixels.
Yeah,
nothing special
at all. So the Lumia, let's talk about the 1320.
Okay.
It's 340. I'm sorry, not 329, 340. But the specs wise, I mean, it's a pretty decent spec'd out phone. It's a dual core 1.7.
So the specs those specs are 1020 specs.
Okay,
right?
Yeah, those are great.
In the Windows Phone world, until the release of the 1520, that's as high end as it gets. It's a dual core processor, 2 gigs of RAM, 32 gigs of storage, and then
expandable also.
64 with micro SD.
Yeah,
so
those are great specs.
This is not a low end thing, and from using the 520, where the 520 actually does have less of a processor, less RAM, less storage. That device, with that size screen, it's fine. It's fine.
I'm still looking for a good argument for in this prepaid world, right? Like or even in the lower end entry model $99 Android market, which a lot of people are doing. They're going into these stores, they're buying the $100 phone, and that's it. Why pick whatever Samsung device it is over this phone? is
Why pick?
yeah. Why would you like? You have the
It,
520 and you have no name
well,
Samsung whatever.
yeah, I think the 520 and the 521. There's also a device we don't have here in the United States called the 625, which is kind of halfway between a 520 and a 1320 from a size perspective. It's a slightly bigger phone, but low end specs. These phones, and then the 1320, which is coming out soon, have or are going to reset the way that people think about buying phones. And combined with that stuff that's going on at T-Mobile and then eventually at other carriers, where they're letting people move forward to different phones yearly instead of every 2 years, letting people use their phones internationally without roaming fees, that kind of stuff. I think we're starting to reset our expectations. And I think a lot of people, well, you can see it. They're selling better. I mean, and Nokia is widely expected to announce better, like record sales of Lumia devices yet again for this most recent quarter because of the 520. Because people can spend $100 on a phone, and then occasionally get the data plans that they want. They don't have to pay monthly. I mean, most data plans are $100 to $150 a month.
Yeah.
Or the whole phone. The whole phone.
No, I mean it's obscenely expensive. It's I think I'm paying for each phone. I have like 4 phones. It's $100 a month. I mean, it's insane how much money you're spending on this stuff. I kind of want to talk about Windows 8.1. It's been a week.
Yep.
What has been the general consensus of what people, what's their opinion of this?
Well, generally speaking, the reviews on Windows 8.1 have been positive overall. I mean, you've heard a lot of the same kind of language. This is the release Microsoft should have shipped a year ago. This is, less of a compromise. I've often pointed out that Windows 8.1 is a better version of Windows for everybody. It's better for people on the desktop. It's better version for people on tablets and all that kind of stuff. It's a no-brainer because if you have Windows 8, you get it for free. By and large, I think the upgrade experience has actually been extremely positive and simple and reliable for most people. But those aren't the people you hear about. You hear from the people who are having problems, and certainly they're having problems. Microsoft, of course, pulled the RT updater over the weekend. They just brought that back. So if you didn't upgrade, you can do that now.
But I mean,
and then you hear from people who have very specific, kinds of problems.
Are the people that were complaining and saying, "Well, I kind of want Windows 7." Are they now looking at this and saying, "Well, okay, this is better. This is good"? Because that was my general opinion when I installed 8.1, the preview version. Just having that little start button down there, it was familiar to me.
Yeah.
And I thought about it as an average user. You know what? Even though it doesn't function exactly how it used to function, it's still there.
Right.
And that made a little bit of a difference for me. The tiny little changes that they did, it was kind of a help. The fact that I could totally never see Metro again unless I have to go in there, that's also a great thing for me. I'm curious if that's how people are reacting. Also, how is Enterprise reacting to this, or it's too soon to know?
Well, it's too soon to know. There's a question around both Windows 8.1 and I would say the new Surface devices, especially Surface 2, which is like the RT device, whether businesses will embrace this kind of thing. The jury's out. I mean, I guess what I would say is that enterprises in particular always move very slowly. They would be more inclined to keep using the same exact PCs with a known version of Windows that works across all of their line of business apps and in-house apps and intranets and all that kind of stuff. So they're not going to upgrade it. It's not like this is going to unleash a bunch of upgrades. I mean, obviously the support for Windows XP is quickly coming to a close, but I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of those businesses didn't actually stick with XP for some amount of time or just go to Windows 7 because it's just more of a known quantity.
And that's the problem that I guess Apple's trying to eliminate. But they'll never have that issue because they have no market share compared to, Windows. The market is
when I was quoted on the Apple event today, Tim Cook added to that 170 million units sold in 3.5 years. That's 170 million is a big number. There are two parts to that story though that Apple isn't going to tell you, and one of them is that PC makers sold 170 million PCs in just the last 2 quarters. So in 6 months of the worst year ever in PC history, PC makers sold as many devices as Apple sold iPads in 3.5 years. But the other issue is that Apple's losing. Apple is not dominant in tablets. They're not dominant in smartphones. And last year already, Android surpassed iPad last year on the tablet market. They're selling more devices, but they're not selling as many as the rest of the industry. Part of it is these low-cost devices. Commoditization is kind of a bitch. There's not a lot you can do about it. When your competitors are selling devices at rock bottom pricing, I mean, Amazon will lose money on every tablet. They're very aggressive.
I mean, the marketplace is totally changing. It's not the same computing marketplace that it was 5 years ago.
Sure.
I don't ever see one dominant force in any kind of market, like in the phone market, in the tablet, in the PC. That's never going to happen anymore because there's a lot of really good products out there. When the iPad came out, nobody was doing it, but 3 years have gone by and people have kind of caught up. The difference, let's talk about just the plain difference. I mean, you take the Surface. Well, let's take a Nokia 2520, which is, a Windows RT tablet. Let's take the Nexus 10. And let's take the iPad, and you put all three of these in front of us. You know what? The differences are not really that much.
Right.
We're not talking drastic, oh my God, this is so much better. We're talking, well, I kind of like this or I kind of like that. While 4 years ago when the iPad came out, there was nothing.
Yeah, no, we can never, look, we can never underestimate the impact that Apple has had on the tech world, on personal computing, right? The Mac, the iPod, the iPhone, and the iPad have all had an enormous impact. And even though, well, actually, the iPod is still number one in that market, but even though the rest of them are no longer number one in their respective markets, their influence extends past that. More important to Apple, those are all still incredibly viable and successful businesses. And so in the same way that we have to kind of filter everything we think about Apple through a special process, you have to look at Apple in that way as well, because even as Apple is losing the tablet market to these Android hordes, even as they've lost the smartphone market to the same crowd, they're making more money than any other company, and they will obviously continue. And so, they can look at things a little bit differently, and very differently, and they can approach the world very differently, and they do. And so, yeah, I do think you're going to see this market where this is kind of Apple world with their own ecosystem. There's going to be that Android thing and sub-branches of it, like the Android version. Like the Amazon version. And then, of course, the Microsoft stuff as well. And, Microsoft will be big in business. They're huge in PCs. Apple is going to be, I don't know what they're going to be huge in, but they're kind of the BMW of this market. I mean, they're going to be very successful. They'll be a minority player from market share perspective, but they're going to be making boatloads of money.
Yeah, what I found fascinating is the multiple shots that they took both to Android and to Microsoft. They
were actually fairly brutal in ways that they normally aren't. Usually Apple is very passive aggressive with that kind of stuff. I was almost a little unhappy with that stuff. I felt it was almost unprofessional.
I haven't seen them do it to that level where
it seemed unusual. I'm gonna go back and watch the whole thing again, obviously, but
they pretty much showed a box copy of Windows 8 Pro, and they wrote $199, and they said, well, we're free, and you're paying $199 for this one. And they took that shot,
which is not the case, for most people.
And they also took the shot with Android. I forgot what they said about Android, but it was the first time that I've seen them do it. And you brought up the whole BMW thing. Like when BMW takes a shot at another car company, it's never Chevy, right? It's never It's never Toyota. It's Audi or Mercedes. It's interesting how they're seeing themselves now. While Apple, 4 years ago, they were above everybody. Nobody does what we do.
If Apple had to, compare themselves to a company that was like them, they would have nobody to talk about. There is nobody like that.
No.
I mean, Apple is like Mercedes or BMW, right? In the same way that if you think about luxury cars and how they will have certain advances first, they were the first cars that had airbags, that kind of stuff. Apple's is those guys. They do kind of the same thing, and so. I think the trick for Apple going forward is going to be finding a new market again. They had a really good run there where, iPod, iPhone, iPad was, amazing. and now it's been a little while. You know, the amount of time that passed between the iPhone and the iPad has already gone by, and we haven't really seen anything. What we've seen is more iPads, more iPhones. You know, it's more MacBook Airs. You know, it's like it's the same. It's just evolution, which is fine. And obviously, lots and lots of people are happy to throw their money or their credit card bills at Apple every year. But you know, at some point, they're going to have to do something new.
Paul, when you use your Amazon tablet, which did you get the latest one?
Yeah.
Okay. When you use that, and then you pick up an iPad and you use the iPad, what's the experience like for you? Do you see a dramatic difference in user experience where you're like, okay, the iPad is better or this is better? If you were to take yourself out and you're the average person, what would you say is a better user experience?
I'm actually leaning towards two experiences that I think are better. I think one is the Nexus experience that you get from Google, kind of the pure Google experience. And the other one is the Apple experience. And I'm going to get one of the new iPads. I'm not sure which one yet, but probably an iPad mini Retina or something like that. I have an iPhone 5C, and I have to say, 5S, sorry. I have to say, going back and playing with an iPhone for the first time, for a lot of time, because I had an iPhone 5 in here a couple of times for a few weeks at a time, but like actually using this thing and putting apps on it and everything, I kind of get the app thing, right? Obviously, how could you not? I mean, there are things out there in the world that I could find valuable. You know, the ability to check in on a plane from JetBlue, the ability to pay for coffee at Starbucks, AAA app that has your account information if your car breaks down, that kind of thing. Amtrak, the ability to buy tickets and pay for tickets, all that kind of stuff. Every one of those things that I just described does not exist on Windows Phone, by the way. And so I get that. I get why that is important. The weird thing about Nexus, or I should say Android and Apple, is that stuff is the only thing that's important about those platforms. Because like the underlying platform, the whole tap here to launch an app is like kind of non-existent. It's like it really doesn't matter in many ways. Whereas on Windows Phone, they tried to push integrated experiences, and we could sort of debate which one makes more sense. But you know, on iOS and on Android, really it's all about the apps. The things that all of these things do equally well, you could get an Amazon Kindle HD, whatever.
Yeah.
You could get any Android device. You could get any Apple device. You could get a Microsoft Surface or any Windows device. Any one of those things will do things like some number of music services, any of which you could use effectively and would be great. The ability to rent movies so that when you go on a trip, you can watch a movie or rent a TV show or buy a TV show, whatever it is. Those things, you know, weather, basic, you know, things like calendar and email, those things work everywhere. So those really aren't differentiators. They're things where people kind of have to keep up, obviously, but there's no big deal. You know, iOS has a clear app advantage, and I really do think that's a huge deal. I mean, obviously, it's not me. It's my opinion. It's a fact. Huge advantage. I think the pure Android experience is getting pretty close. And I think for a lot of people, that is, you know, that's just about as good, you know. Nexus 7 comes pretty close.
The Nexus 7 is a great device, but when I use it, I don't feel the same. Especially with the apps, I don't think that that the apps on Android are at the level of iOS right now.
You don't think they're?
No, I don't, and I don't know. I don't know if it's.
So, no,
and
you're
you know
right.
what? And I'll tell you why. Is because these poor developers have to develop for 15 different devices. I mean,
okay,
and sometimes 40 different devices, and I think it makes it very difficult for them to refine and fine tune the application for that hardware.
Maybe I don't really I don't really care about that. But I like I said though, on iOS, there are some apps you go in and it's got the look and feel of it is very consistent with the new iOS 7 look and feel. But some apps you go into them and it's like going back in time to 2007. Like it's like a real 2008, I guess. It's a real old school looking app, you know.
But I mean, Google even has the problem. Google has a problem with their own applications where they crash. I can't use a Google Hangout consistently, the Google Hangout app, on either my Nexus, Galaxy Nexus, fine, this is a 2-year-old phone, okay, it may have problems, or the Nexus 7. I can't, it crashes every other time I go to use it. On the iPad, works perfectly. No problem.
By the way, so I'm going to be writing about this soon, but one of the other interesting things is like the cross-platform pollination stuff. So, for example, on an iPhone or an iPad, there are a lot of Microsoft apps. So if you're kind of invested in the Microsoft world, you could use one of these as a device, and it's like there's a lot of stuff in there. There's a lot of Google apps on iOS, right? If you want to use Google Maps, Gmail, Quick Office, Google Plus, Hangouts, Currents, Google, YouTube, yada, yada, yada. There's a lot of stuff on there. It's pretty good. A lot of Amazon apps are on iOS as well, by the way. When you add that up, I mean, iOS kind of obviously comes out ahead from sort of an apps perspective. But the interesting thing is that stuff's not true of the other platforms, you know?
Yeah.
There are 1 or 2 Amazon apps on Windows. There are 1 Google app and nothing from Apple. Apple doesn't put apps anywhere else.
No, I mean, I'm not surprised.
You know, I mean, there's a bunch of Amazon stuff on Android, but not all of it, by the way. You can't do Amazon Instant Video on Android, which I find to be very strange. Unless that's changed recently. Maybe it has. Nothing from Apple. And a bunch of stuff from Microsoft. Not as much as they put on iOS, though. And then you go to Amazon, and Amazon's like this weird little world. It's kind of between Android and Microsoft, really, because there are almost no Google apps there. There's no Microsoft apps, no Apple apps, obviously. So it's kind of like this curated environment. But
and you know, if you were to look at just on paper, they seem to have a far larger advantage than any of them do, because they have that Amazon store, which they pretty much control all online purchases. You know, I think that's a huge advantage for them.
Yes, sure.
Everybody's using Amazon. You can market the products on there. You could, you kind of could control it, and you could sell this thing for virtually nothing and make the money back in more than one way.
Well, Android, sorry, this company names are all the same. Amazon has a unique advantage where they sell physical stuff too. And so they can do these cross promotions that are just not possible, for like Apple to do, right? They have a program called Prime Shipping that gets you certain things, including free streaming video on Amazon Instant Video. It's a weird cross, it's like I can get a package of diapers delivered to my house for free in 2 days. And I can also watch free streaming video on the web. It's kind of a weird combination of stuff.
I mean, we have that Amazon affiliate program, and sometimes like I'll look and I'll see what people are buying. I can't see who's buying what, but I've seen a trend where we're not talking about gadgets and books and bicycles. We're seeing like toilet paper, Chef Boyardee, canned tomato soup, like normal stuff that you go to the store to purchase. People are buying it on Amazon, and they're getting it the next day. I think it's totally changing. I think people's perception of how they're doing purchases are totally changing. I think that's the most amazing part of it. How we've gone from a society that, for toilet paper, you go, and for bread, you walk out to the store, you buy your bread. Now we're buying like 500 cases of toilet paper on Amazon. Yeah.
Well, we used to go to Costco, I don't, the non-technology parts of Amazon are not personally interesting to me, other than the fact that what I just mentioned, that you get this weird kind of side effect. I don't know. There's a whole attitude from Apple that I sort of don't like, but they make good products, and if you can afford them, there's no reason not to get that stuff. I mean, it's very high quality. There's no way around that. I agree with you that the Google stuff is not as advanced and by advanced I just mean, mature and so forth.
But has it not matured because it's just that the developers aren't there and they're not developing?
No, I think they are there. I think you know what? It's Windows all over again. I think the only thing I can say about Android is, honestly, for most people, it's good enough. The truth is, if you have to have your choice of every single app that's ever been made, you want to be on iOS. That's where that is. And there are other advantages to iOS, which I think are very important. Apple does things that other people don't. They have iTunes U, all this amazing free educational material. They do stuff around these interactive textbooks, which is kind of incredible.
You know what I found really useful? Something that I use, and I've had a Mac for years, and I never did it before this. iMessage. I love the fact that I could message my wife's phone from my laptop. I don't have to get my phone and use my phone to message her. I just do it straight from my phone.
Obviously, though, you're not going to see iMessage on Android.
Yeah.
So that's a form of lock-in. I mean, do we begrudge them this? It's kind of hard to say. I mean, it's just something to know about. I don't know. It makes it harder for your wife when the time comes for her to buy a new phone to say, well, I really want this Samsung S13 or whatever we're on at the time.
Yeah.
It doesn't have iMessage. I'm not going to get that. I mean, these things can be problematic.
It just the what iOS does better than Android. There's a lot that iOS does, but it's it's a refined OS experience where like chat on Android is still not fixed.
Hey, Android is an OS that has
15,000 different ways.
For Gmail
Yeah.
and one app for all other email.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but that is ludicrous.
Well, you also have Google Talk and Google, Chat, and you have Gmail Chat and Hangouts, and
sure.
it gets confusing because I'll get a Hangout
Windows.
request on here.
It's Windows all over again. Windows is the system that had 3 different photo editors built in and 2 different IM platforms, and this is the kind of chaos that many people, frankly, kind of comfortable with. I mean, I think a lot of people who are Windows guys look at Android and they're like, yes, thank you. This is the one I was looking for.
I'm hoping with the next version, 4.4 is going to be announced in a couple days. I think they said
anytime now. I know this week could be getting uglier. Yeah,
I think
could be anytime.
Friday, or when did they say 26, 20?
Along with the Nexus 5, right?
Which I'm probably going to buy the Nexus 5 because I have a Nexus
Galaxy.
Galaxy.
That you saw that leaked briefly, and it's going to be $350 for the base
unsubsidized.
Great.
Unsubsidized, phenomenal. But the problem with that is, what carrier is it going to be? Verizon? Because Verizon dropped the ball with the Nexus 7.
My understanding is it's going to be cross wireless carrier. It's going to be like a universal.
Yeah, but you know what the problem with the Nexus 7 is, right? That Verizon, even though it works on Verizon is not supporting the LTE on the Nexus 7.
So I actually use AT&T, so I don't really give a crap about Verizon.
No, thanks.
That's too bad. Yeah,
I'm stuck with this crappy service. But again, something like that I can't ever see happening with Apple, with Google. Yeah. Who knows? Like I should never be saying, "Oh, it's on every carrier," but is Verizon going to carry it? Who knows?
Yep. Yeah, we'll see.
Like that's a crazy thing in this world where everything is on every platform. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm excited. I mean, a lot's happening, and then we got the Xbox coming next month. Less than a month. 3. What is it? 3? Yeah, almost a month. And the PlayStation's coming out in 3 weeks. That's it. This is crazy. My money's just going. I had my credit card ready. Just came home. She's like, "How much did you charge today?" I'm like, "Nothing yet." November 1st. November is the month.
You can't even pre-order an iPad.
Yeah.
Yet.
Well, they're smart. This is what they want, people waiting in line.
Sure.
That's what they want. All right, guys. Hey, by the way, let me just this Instagram thing, right? Last week I said there's no Instagram app on Windows Phone. I wasn't really talking about. I was giving an example of how the companies are not developing for it. Now they announced that it's going to be coming, but that was just an example that I was given. Like, why didn't Instagram develop for Windows Phone? And until Instagram, and as an example, as a company, starts developing for Windows Phone, you're going to have a problem. There's going to be the App Store is not going to be as large as Apple and Google. A lot of people were kind of upset at that comment that I made, and they pointed out that there are Instagram apps and there are other apps that do it. So I think there was a little confusion there. What I was saying was the company itself, like Instagram itself, should make a priority and say, okay, Instagram is coming out for Windows Phone, for iOS, and Android. Until you're bunched with them, I think it's a problem. I don't know, Paul. I upset a lot of people.
All I can say is we're going to get Instagram, and it's not going to change a thing.
Listen, I cannot wait to take decent photos with this phone and just ruin it. Add like 15 crappy filters on it.
Yeah.
And, just write hashtags
apparently, see, I don't use Instagram because, of course, I'm a Windows Phone user.
Yeah. And you're a normal person.
Yeah. But apparently, you can post to Instagram without destroying the photo. Like, apparently...
You can, yeah. You can.
Yeah,
but
so I guess nobody takes advantage of that little feature, but I guess
you want to know what's so funny? you know what people do when they do that? They write hashtag no filter, like it's a big deal.
Oh, there
Like
you go.
no filter.
Well, I think because there's a lot of derision toward people who, post those super high, contrast photos that you often see on Instagram. I've never understood that. I remember testing it on one of the early. It was probably an iPhone 3G or something at CES years ago, and I took a photo with it, or took a photo and put it through Instagram, and it's like, yep, looks like a Polaroid.
Yeah.
A type of photo that I've not wanted since the 1970s.
And now it's back.
I had a Kodak disc camera in the 1980s that was better than
Paul,
a Polaroid.
do you know what the hipsters are doing in Brooklyn here? They're taking their phones and they're putting it into cases, and the case is a Walkman.
Oh, yeah.
Like
sure.
it's literally
Like yellow Sony Walkman.
yeah, it's like
or whatever.
literally a case
Also,
that
yeah,
made to
yeah.
look like it, and they put it in, they lock it up, and they walk around with headphones with it. It's the most insane thing in the world. I want to punch these people right in the stomach, all of them.
I want a case that looks like a Zune.
That's
like
gonna
a
happen in
brown
10
Zune.
years. That's the original.
Yeah.
I just want a case where I could hit them all in the head with. I mean, it's baffling.
Like one of those spiked balls that they would have used in the Middle Ages.
Yeah.
Swinging around. It's my anti-iPad photo taking device.
Every time I see one, I see one of those people that's holding this thing up like this and taking a photo.
The best
takes so much
takedown for that would be if you somehow knew how to use a whip, and you could just crack it right into the iPad and have it, not hit the guy, but just make him drop it,
and then
and you just laugh and walk away.
that's what I'm going to start doing.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that wraps it up. Hey, if you want to help us out, help out the GFQ Network, use our Amazon affiliate link right on the bottom. If you're watching live, there's an Amazon button on the side. You could go and click on that, and it kind of cookie caches whatever it's doing, and it knows that when you're buying, we get something. We're not doing it. Amazon is doing it. Amazon knows all the information. We don't know who's buying what. We just get a small, tiny little percentage from every sale. It helps us out. I just recently had to upgrade the microphone here in the studio for the secondary mic. So I'm testing it out now, and I got it because you guys keep buying stuff with our Amazon link. Or you can go to gfq.co/Amazon and just go there and just buy stuff on Amazon. WinSuperside.com for Paul Thurrott. Also on Twitter at Thurrott. I'm Andrew Zarian on I'm Andrew Zarian on Thurrott. I'm Andrew Zarian on Twitter. Paul also could be seen on Windows Weekly every Thursday at 2 p.m. East, where he talks all things Microsoft, which is a lot of fun. One of my favorite shows to watch. And hey, me and Paul and I are going to be doing a conspiracy theory show. It's going to be called This Week in Reptilians, where we're going to discuss how the entire planet is run by reptile people. So stay tuned for that. We'll see you all next week on What the Tech. Good night, everybody.